Hello, everybody. I hope your day is going really well. Today, I have Lila Sage with me, who is one of my favorite astrologers. And she is not just an astrologer, but she also looks at a bunch of other stuff that I really don't deal with, astrocartography and zodiacal releasing. And so today, I wanted to invite Lila on to talk about zodiacal releasing. And maybe today we can just explain what it is and why it would be important. Then maybe tomorrow we can look at it with like election stuff and other interesting things. Okay, ready, set, go. What is zodiacal releasing? Why should we care about it? How does it work?
Yeah, so zodiacal releasing is a very ancient timing technique. It's a Hellenistic astrology technique, which means it's a very old astrology technique that comes from the Greek period, which is one of the oldest that we have. And the reason that most astrologers don't use it, like Ali doesn't use it, is because the records that taught us about zodiacal releasing have just been translated. So it's been in process for like 10 years. Chris Brennan's been translating it and now we have it. And so, what it does is it uses mathematical points on your chart called lots, lot of spirit. People have heard of like the lot of fortune to be able to time your life and show us when in people's life they will be in what's called a peak period. And peak periods are the most important periods in your life or the busiest, or if you think about being in a peak, that is what it splits it up into. So it actually uses the rule of threes. So the rule of threes is this idea that you're always in one of three periods during your life. The first is called a preparation period, the second is called a peak period, and the third is called a post period or a polishing period, PPP. So think about climbing up a mountain. The preparation period is going to be a little bit more about like researching, building, learning, preparing. The peak period is going to be that busy period where you're doing things, you're at the top of the mountain, you're finishing, you're doing all your stuff. And then the post period is going to be polishing stuff up, cooling it down, bringing it all through, finishing it all up. So we can actually get really precise dates and timelines for when your peak periods in your life will be based on this technique.
Oh my gosh. Okay, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking of like I have very specific periods in my life where I felt like, oh my gosh, this probably has to be a peak period. Like there's no other, right? But like what is the software that you would use or like how do you personally do the math here? Do you
So
have like a software?
yeah, so you can. And the great thing about this is, unlike some other astrology techniques, this is super accessible to people. So, what I use, you can do it on Astrogold and other softwares, but I actually use just a website called zodiacalreleasing.net. Yep, super
Okay.
accessible. And when I share my screen, do you want me to share it really quick? I can show people what it
Yeah,
looks
let's
like.
let's see it. I want to see it. I
Yeah,
haven't seen
let's
any
take a
of
look.
this yet.
Yes. This is a whole new thing. Okay. When I share my screen, you will be able to see this. If I go over to this next thing, can you see this? Yes, you
I
can.
can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is what
Whoa.
zodiacal Yeah, this is what zodiacal releasing looks like. I love this website because it gives you some analysis. And if you scroll down for people who are not astrologers, it will tell you, oh, this is what a peak period is. This is what a loosing of the bond is. This is what a culmination period is. So it explains itself very, very well.
Wow.
And also, if you hover over this, if you're not in astrology and you're like, what are these signs? If you hover, it'll tell you, oh, that's Capricorn. Oh, that's Aquarius. That's Gemini. And if you hover also in the middle, it'll actually tell you the exact time that these windows open. So this window opened at 9:28 p.m. and it'll tell me when that window opened. So what you're looking at to explain a little further these levels, the reason we have levels. So I want to think about this as like a book, okay? And so level one is going to be our title page, okay? It's telling us all about the book and what's in the book. And these chunks of time, see how these are very large chunks of time? They're decades. Like this one's going to be like 30 years. It's a huge time chunk, right? So this is the overarching realm, right? It's the title page of this period of time. So this is the overarching. Level one is the big picture that we're looking at. But you can click into level one and see when I click, it changes. And when I open, it's like I went to the title page, I read this, chapter. I said, "Oh, I want to look at this chapter." So then in level 2, I'm turning to that chapter, and that chapter is going to tell me more about smaller pieces. It's going to give me a little bit more in depth about what's going on. And so you can see these time chunks are much smaller. They're only, 2 to 3 years usually. At the most, they'll be like 4 years. So they're smaller. And then within those chunks, it's like I turn to, I went to the chapter. Now I'm turning to a specific page. That's level 3. Level 3 is going to give you months. These are the months. So it's going to be 1 or 2 months at most. You can see this is June, this is July. And then so if you picture, title page, chapter, this is the actual page. These are the words. Level 4 are the words on the page. So level 4 are the actual days, weeks, months. And so you kind of read this as if it's in layers, right? So this is a post period. You may be in a post period on a level 1, but you could be in a peak period on a level 4. So a busier time in the middle of that post period. So we're reading this kind of like in layers, and we're working with that. And so something we can do with this, so we can target these exact dates when things are more likely to come up. But something important to know when you read this, all these the blue boxes are always going to be the peak periods. So blue box is always peak period. The one that comes before the blue box will always be a preparation period, and the one that comes after will always be a post period. So always go prep, peak, post, prep, peak, post if you're doing this at home. Does that make sense?
It does. Okay, so if we go over to level one, so whoever this is has a peak period from Christmas of 2020 until 23rd of October of 2032. So that's like 12 years of a peak period. But inside of that peak period, we have level 2. And inside of that, sometimes he's going to be in a preparation period
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
okay for like a couple of months or like a year, but then within that year there's going to be these ups and downs. So it's kind of, so would it be sorry, let me think of it, but I mean it's just like regular life where like you might have like 10 years where your career does really great, but on a year to year level, some years are going to be better, some years are going to be worse. And then on a month to month level, some months you're sick with pneumonia the whole month, but then the next month you do really great. And then on a day to day level, like you're having your peak year. It's in your peak decade. You're having a great week, but on Tuesday you kind of have a little bit of a head cold, and then you're fine the next day. And that's what we're kind of looking at, is all of these different wheels turning. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's
Okay.
accurate. So that
Wow.
that allows us to be really precise about what might be going on, right? Like it gives us more precision around what might be happening for that person at that time, what we might experience on a day-to-day level. Now, there's a lot more to this, like we haven't talked about loosing of the bonds or these culmination periods. But something that every person can do if they log into theirs, this website's super easy to use. And that I do is I take my level 4, because that's the day to day, and I put it in my calendar. So, like, if this were me, I would say, post period, Libra post period L4, because level 4, Libra post period L4 from June 7th until June 9th, you know? So,
Mm.
I will do that. These highlights, just so everyone knows, if it's highlighted, that means that's where you are in this moment. Like this is your life right now
Oh,
at this exact
wow.
time.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah. So like this person, on a level 4, they're in a post period, um, until the 12th. of August, right? Then they'll start building something new again. Does that make sense?
That does. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I see on these levels as I've done this, as I put my level 4 in, and then I'll note when it changes on level 3 as well. But when I put my level 4 in, I see that like the first couple months I was like, I'm just going to try this. Like let's just do an experiment. Let's see what comes up. I'm not going to try to do anything. And I just found this to be incredibly accurate. Like I'll give you an example. But one of my examples was I had a peak period coming up, and for me, it was an Aquarius peak, which for me, Aquarius peaks are my biggest peaks. So there's actually a way to rank these peaks to see how high they are versus how low they are, how big they'll be for you, and we can get into that at some point. But I had this big peak coming up and I was like, I have nothing planned. There's nothing on my calendar. There's no way I'm going to be that busy. Well, what happened was a woman, I went on her podcast and she did not tell me when she was going to drop the podcast. And the day that that peak period opened, she dropped our podcast and my week just blew up suddenly.
I
So,
remember that. That
yeah.
was crazy.
Yeah, so it just like blew
Wow.
up or like every time that I again, I didn't have any control over these dates when I was going on other podcasts. I let them pick all the dates. They always aligned with peak periods. Those dates would always be peak periods on my level 4. So, I have seen this happen
Wow.
and be crazy. And I do see the layers, like as an example, this person is working through a Sagittarius. Recently I was going through a Virgo period. And we all know, I mean, maybe we don't all know, but for those who don't know, Virgo has to do a lot with like health, hygiene, what's going on with your health. And Virgo is also where I have Mars. So I have Mars in Virgo. And Mars is my malefic. So in my chart, Mars is my tough planet. It's one of my tough planets and it makes things tough for me. And so I during that time I was in a Mars. I was in Virgo, which has to do with health. And then I had a big peak period. And that's when my son went to the hospital for 4 days during that peak period. So it all had to do with health. And Aquarius is where I have Saturn, which is the other malefic, the other tough, right? The other tough planet. So I knew it was going to be tough, but I didn't realize, like, oh, my kid's going to be in the hospital. And he was in the hospital for the entire peak period. And as soon as I finished that peak period, he got released from the hospital on the new moon. So,
That's crazy. Okay,
yeah,
well that's great because I was gonna ask, I mean, like a peak sounds great, but I
right.
don't think it's necessarily positive so much as like meaningful.
Exactly.
Because I was
Exactly.
thinking I wonder if my pneumonia like when at the beginning of this I was thinking of a couple different parts of my life where I was like that was definitely a peak, but I kind of feel like my pneumonia experience was a peak.
Yeah, I'm
I don't
sure it
know.
was.
You okay. I mean, it was, a low point in its way
Mm-hmm.
of my life, but at the same time, it just was 100% of my life at that time, and in a way that things aren't normally. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like, would you say that that's like kind of I mean, is that an accurate representation of a peak period? Like, as I'm thinking of the times of my life that I would think correspond to that, it's the times where my entire self was entirely focused on like one enormous task
Yeah. Yeah.
that seemed
Men
really important.
Yes, and you will see as you track it, you'll see themes for every period. So yeah, I would love to clarify that. Peaks are not always like I'm on top of the world. It's the best ever. Everything's the best. Peaks are just real they're busy and they're more memorable and they're more meaningful, right? They're very meaningful and they're usually very it's almost like this is the perspective of other people also because usually they're the things other people remember about you as well. Those are the things. And especially when we get to the level 1 and we look at a lot of celebrities, we always see that at the height of their fame, they're always in a peak period. Always, always. So
Wow.
it's always where we remember them, what's the most memorable. But depending on your chart and the way that we kind of delineate whether something's going to be easier or tougher is by looking at where Mars and Saturn are and where Jupiter and Venus are. So the reason being, for people who don't know, Mars and Saturn are traditionally the malefics. They're the tough planets in people's charts. They are seen as like just the tough times, the bringers of hard things. And then Venus and Jupiter are always going to be seen as the lighter times, the better planets. They're benefics, they're beneficial, they're always helping you out. So because this is based on Hellenistic and ancient astrology, we need to interpret it based on ancient astrology principles, which is, where do you have Mars, right? Or where do you have Saturn, and who's squaring them and who's opposed to them?
In the
So
natal chart, or also taking into account the transit?
no, the natal
That's
chart
the natal chart.
specifically. It's always the natal chart.
Now I want to
So,
like pull my chart.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
and
what have
you
I got
can,
going on?
yes, there's you can yeah, we could pull your chart. We should totally do it. You can I can change this one if you want.
Oh, that's
Uh
okay. We'll finish up with
yeah.
our overview
Okay.
and maybe we'll do that
Yeah.
on another day.
Yeah, so it's always going to be based on whether or not, so you'll see up here like they'll say like
Oh,
ruled by Jupiter, minor peak period, opposite Venus, right, which is your benefic, but it really matters inferior squares versus superior, which we don't need to get into here about how hard, but there is a way to rank how difficult it is, just like there's a way to rank how big of a peak it is and how small of a peak it is. But we really just, number one, we want to know, are you a day chart? Were you born during the day when the sun was in the sky, or were you born at night? So those are the big things, because that's going to tell us whether or not Mars is tougher for you or Saturn's tougher for you, right? So you and I are perfect examples because I'm a day chart and you're a night chart. So Mars is tougher for me and Saturn's tougher for you, right? And so wherever they are in the sky, whatever sign they're in, let's say mine was in Sagittarius or something. Oh, I already told you mine's in Virgo. Mine's a Virgo.
okay.
So whatever Virgo is for me is always going to be the toughest. And then of course, everything that's square to Virgo. So all of the
Okay.
it's by modality. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
All
that
of
would
the
be
mutable
Pisces, all
signs.
the mutable signs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if
Okay.
you were fixed, then it would be, if I had it in Leo, then it'd be all the fixed signs like Taurus and Scorpio, right? Those are
Yeah.
going to be tougher. And it's going to be the opposite, right, for your benefic planet. It's going to be better. Let's say I had Jupiter and Capricorn, right? Capricorn periods are going to be the best for me, right? Because that's where I've
Okay.
got Jupiter, if that makes sense.
That does make
So,
sense. Okay, so I have like a little bit of a, you know, okay, so my natal Jupiter squares. So I was born on full moon, and my
mm-hmm,
natal Jupiter squares both of those. So is a Jupiter square, I mean, so you mentioned how you look at what is squaring things,
mm-hmm.
not trining things.
Not training. I know.
Okay, so even with the benefics, you care about the square more than the
Mm-hmm.
trine. Or like the
Yes,
trine doesn't
ma'am.
even matter for this calculation.
Yes, it's
Okay.
always the square. So a benefic, so in Hellenistic astrology and ancient astrology, a square from a benefic is as beneficial as a trine from a benefic. So
Oh, I did not know
square,
this.
yeah. So squares from benefics are helpful to you. Yeah, which is great.
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
like,
it's
this
great.
is great news.
This
Hooray.
is yeah, yeah.
Never heard that before.
Yes, yeah. So squares from benefics are beneficial. So they're helpful to us. So if I had it in a card, if I had Jupiter in a cardinal sign, then Cancer and all the other ones, right, are going to be helpful to me.
Okay.
But we can rank how helpful they're going to be basically by where they are. So like the most helpful is going to be the sign that it's in. So let's take that example. Okay, Jupiter and Capricorn. So Capricorn's going to be number one. It's going to be the most helpful to me. And then the opposite, the opposition is going to be number two. So Cancer. And then the superior square, which is going to be two away, it's going to be Aries. It's going to be the closest one to it around the zodiac. So the way that you go. So that's a superior. And then the one behind it, which will be Libra, will be the weakest. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
Here, let me do it on, let me change so let's look at this, right? Let's look at Kamala. We're not talking about her today, but later we could. So like let's see, she's got Jupiter and Taurus, right? So Taurus is going to be number 1 best for her, okay? Then we go across, Scorpio is going to be number 2 best. Then we go down the zodiac, right? We go because it's always counterclockwise, so we go counterclockwise to the next. So 1, 2, Leo is third, and then we go backwards. 1, 2, Aquarius is going to be the least helpful for her.
Wow,
So
but
that's the way you rank it. What'd you say?
still helpful.
Still helpful,
Like
still
in the rank, it
helpful,
would just be the fourth one.
still helpful. But you
Oh.
have to, she does have, she's a night chart and she does have Saturn there. So that's going to make it really a mixed bag for her, right? It's going to be tougher for her. So if you're somebody who has, let's say you have Mars and Jupiter together, or Saturn and Venus, if you have good planets and bad planets all together, what usually happens is it ends up being a mixed bag for you with a silver lining, right? It's tough, it's a challenge, but it ends up being good for you in the end. It's not just bad. So mixed bag if you have them together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is awesome. Okay, so for regular people, if they're interested in looking at their zodiacal releasings, they'll go to zodiacalreleasing.net and put in their
Yes.
own chart information.
Correct.
Okay, awesome. And then it will run this little thingy here, and then
Right.
they can go through their own life and
Mm-hmm.
just see like, okay, what was I up to in 2005? And like, if you remember an important date from your life, you could go find that date and see what was going on and see if that aligns up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you
Yep.
could add
Exactly.
in the upcoming stuff on your phone, like in your calendar, and just see how it
What
lines up,
happens?
see what happens. Yeah, my
Yeah.
thought with it, as you were talking, is that sorry to the men out there, but being aware of this, like to me, it would not be like divination. It would be like a woman charting her period,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, and it's just like, okay, well, next week I'm probably gonna need to lay low for a minute. And the next week, I'm probably gonna be in the spotlight whether I like it or not. And then next week, and
Mm-hmm.
so like you just kind of plan accordingly, but just have um, just have it in the back of your mind to, I don't know, make the world make sense. I feel like here, your son's hospitalization and the
Mm-hmm.
lady dropping that podcast, and you've been able to say
Mm-hmm.
like, well, this was a peak period, and it's
Right.
like, hey, I guess it makes sense. So
Right.
it's just another way that we can kind of make sense of our lives, I guess.
It is, and it helps for me. This is what it does for me. Well, it can do a million things, but one of the things it's done for me is to see God's perfect timing. That like literally he's so in control. He knows what he's doing. He loves us. The tapestry of our lives is woven together beautifully. We don't need to worry because he's got us. He's got our back. Our timing is perfect, and the timing and everything in the universe is perfectly orchestrated. And for those people who are kind of worried about like, oh, what about your free will, or like this shows me I can't choose. That's not what it's showing you at all. It's exactly like Ali says all the time. This is like the weather, right? You can choose for it to be good or bad. You can choose for it to be better or worse. This is just showing us that God creates patterns, that our life was created out of a spiritual pattern, and that there are spiritual patterns that guide our lives, and that we learn these spiritual patterns. It lets us release, surrender, and let go, and let God do his work in us so that we can live our best lives, and not have to worry. So that's the way I feel about it.
Yeah, it's like the seasons of the year almost,
Mhm. Mhm.
or like day versus night. Like, is this a morning time? Is this day? Is this like sleeping time,
Mhm.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I think our work here is done for now, but we'll have you back on again very, very soon because this is so interesting. Everybody remember that we're still working through our 30 days of taking out the trash challenge. I'll put the link to that below. Um, I hope you are experiencing some life-changing shifts with that. And I'll put Lila's link below as well because you can actually hire her for a one-on-one reading, and she does a lot of really cool stuff. She can tell you where, I mean, she does astrocartography, so that deals with like the physical location where you are at, and like if you're trying to move and you don't know where to move, that's like very helpful. And she can help you parse this apart and figure it out and also just do like a natal chart reading. Anyways, go check her out. Thank you for being here, Lila. This was
No
amazing.
problem. Yeah, so
Hey.
fun.
Well,
Okay.
thank you so much. And bye guys. We'll see you later.